I think that ultimately this evidence is in service to creating better lives for people. And that's what my goal is to continue to do that with the hope that it is useful to those who most need it and most want to improve the conditions in their communities.
I'm JB Wogan from Mathematica, and welcome back to On the Evidence. "30 years ago, President Bill Clinton signed bipartisan legislation creating what is now known as AmeriCorps, a federal agency for national service and volunteerism. Since then, the agency estimates that more than 1.3 million AmeriCorps members and hundreds of thousands more AmeriCorps seniors volunteers have provided billions of hours of service across each of the 50 states and U.S. territories. AmeriCorps functions as a kind of Swiss Army knife for addressing challenges in our communities, with members helping to prepare today's students for tomorrow's jobs, lead conservation and climate change efforts, connect returning veterans to jobs, fight the opioid epidemic, support seniors to live independently, make college more accessible and affordable, and help Americans rebuild their lives following disasters. If you're like me, you've probably heard of AmeriCorps before, but maybe you or someone you know was once an AmeriCorps member or AmeriCorps seniors volunteer. What you might not know is that AmeriCorps has an Office of Research and Evaluation, which studies the impacts of the agency's investments in national service and volunteerism. On this episode of On the Evidence, we commemorate the 30th anniversary of AmeriCorps by discussing the role of data and research in helping both AmeriCorps and its grantees deliver on their respective missions. Our guests are Dr. Mary Hyde, Stephanie Garippa, Diana Gioia, and Scott Richman. Mary is the Director of Research and Evaluation at AmeriCorps. Stephanie oversees the AmeriCorps program at Maggie's Place, an Arizona-based nonprofit and AmeriCorps grantee serving mothers through housing, education, and direct support services. Diana is a former AmeriCorps member who works with Stephanie and is the Data and Evaluation Coordinator at Maggie's Place. Scott is a senior researcher at Mathematica who co-authored a report for AmeriCorps synthesizing 5 years' worth of studies describing the state of the evidence where the agency seeks to make an impact. On the episode, we discuss the important but complex task of measuring the impact of AmeriCorps, given that it seeks to not only spur higher levels of civic engagement and community service, but to simultaneously help its service members, partnering organizations, the communities in which both operate, and society as a whole. We talk about the kinds of evidence that AmeriCorps and grantees like Maggie's Place collect, how that evidence is used to drive impact, and how the role of evidence in guiding AmeriCorps' work has evolved over time. If you're new to the show, please consider subscribing. More information on how to subscribe on your podcasting app of choice is available at mathematica.org/ontheevidence. I hope you enjoy the conversation. All right. Well, Mary, we're going to start with you, and
Okay.
I'm hoping you can do some table setting for us and for the listeners. I suspect many of our listeners have heard of AmeriCorps before and maybe have heard of a specific volunteer project. But if you could just give a lay of the land, what does AmeriCorps do? What is the mission of the agency?
Our mission is to improve lives, strengthen communities, and foster civic engagement through service and volunteering. So what does that mean? What does that look like? You mentioned that some folks might be familiar with our programs, but in general, if you want to participate in our programs, we have opportunities for people of all ages, and they can volunteer in one of our 6 results-based national service programs. We have our AmeriCorps Seniors programs, which are foster grandparents program, the Senior Companion program, and the RSVP program. Or you can volunteer in our AmeriCorps State National Program, our VISTA program, or our National Civilian Community Corps. A key component of all of these programs is mobilizing volunteers. So if you're going to participate in any one of these programs, you're going to be involved in some way in organizing volunteers around different policy challenges or issues, such as early literacy or numeracy, independent living or aging in place, disaster response and recovery, or access to viable career paths. So those are just some examples of what we do and what our mission is and how we achieve it.
Okay, and I wanted to ask about how the mission has changed over time, or maybe not changed, but how different aspects of the mission have been emphasized by Congress and agency leadership since its inception back in 1993.
Sure. I think I could probably answer that best by talking a little bit about how the agency's evidence story has evolved, because I think that reflects the different emphasis that has been placed on different aspects of our mission. So, what do I mean by that? I would say early on, we really kind of focused on the actual participant or the volunteer in the program. We focused on volunteering behaviors across the general population. So, it's kind of, if you think about a big funnel, we talked about what does this look like in the general population at large? What does this mean for the actual volunteers in our national service program? So we wanted to understand their experience, we wanted to understand their outcomes, and we wanted to understand sort of the best practices around getting people to volunteer in their community around different issues. That sort of began to morph into more of the community focus. So if you recall, I talked about improving lives, but also strengthening communities. So we began to evolve from thinking a lot about volunteering behavior in general or the actual members and volunteers themselves, and really wanted to start focusing on the community impact of our programs. And that shift sort of corresponded with the rise of program evaluation as a practice inside of federal government, as well as some other big policy trends within the federal government. And so that sort of meant a shift to looking at different interventions, different program models. So not that we stopped paying attention to the volunteers and members themselves, but suddenly we were much more focused on specific programs like tutoring programs, college access and persistence programs, workforce development programs, peer recovery coach, youth mental health, very specific issue areas and programs tied to addressing those issue areas. I think that was probably the last 20 years in a nutshell, sort of this difference in focus. Today, I think you will find that we are really trying to have a balanced approach to that. So we have an impact framework that we've developed that really looks at all of those dimensions of our mission and all of those areas of results that we're trying to achieve. So we're looking at the participants, we're looking at our partners, we're looking at communities, and we're looking at society. So I think that's been the evolution over time since the agency was founded in 1993.
Okay, you've got participants, you've got the issue areas, and you've got the specific interventions or programs. So in terms of measuring performance, you lead the part of the agency that has the task of actually measuring whether you're delivering on those different performance areas, right? So I was hoping you could explain, Mary, what is the Office of Research and Evaluation and what is its role in the broader context of AmeriCorps' work?
Yeah, I think that our role, as you said, is we take a lead role in developing the evidence base for our programs and for our national service participants. I think that we're responsible for working with our program colleagues, our business support offices, and particularly our chief data office to really think about the types of information that we need to make the case and to create insights into what might be working and what might need to be changed. And what that means is we have to take a lot of different approaches to how we find evidence, how we build evidence. We rely on administrative data. We look at performance metrics so that we can assess impact real time, if you will. So as programs are going along, as things are being implemented, what types of outcomes are we seeing as this work is being unfolded in communities. That relies on administrative data, that relies on performance measures that our partners submit to us. We also use foundational research and program evaluation. Some of these questions require more of a social science approach. It requires comparative design so that we're looking at this tutoring program relative to another tutoring program or absence of a tutoring program. So we need to look at those types of outcomes in that way. I think that we rely on survey research a lot. I spoke a little earlier about looking at these types of behaviors in the U.S. general population. We have a survey that we administer in partnership with the U.S. Census. We have an annual survey that we administer to our members. So we use a lot of different approaches and a lot of different strategies to generate what we think is the most relevant data and evidence for any particular question or any particular policy need.
I did want to ask one more follow-up question, Mary, which was
Sure.
who do you conceive of as the audiences or the consumers of your office's work? Is it Congress? Is it members of the public? Is it many different audiences? Who are you producing research for?
I would say all of the above, right? I mean, we have a lot of stakeholder groups. I mean, we are taxpayer dollars being used in communities. So we certainly share this evidence and build this evidence for the purposes of demonstrating that these are good investments. This is, giving the public the quality services they deserve. Certainly Congress, who has a hand in our appropriations. We certainly think of our program partners as key audiences for this information. Our hope and our goal is that we use this data and evidence to make continuous improvements in our strategies, in our particular programs, in the way in which we engage our members and volunteers. So again, sort of going back to our framework and the dimensions of our mission, our hope is that at the end of the day, people take whatever evidence we're generating out of our office and other offices to use to make things better, to improve and strengthen them, or in some cases to pivot and not do something if it's showing to be ineffective.
Well, I heard you say program partners, and that's a perfect segue to talk to our friends here at Maggie's Place. Stephanie, I was hoping you could explain what your organization Maggie's Place is, and how does AmeriCorps support your organization's work?
Absolutely. We are a nonprofit organization in Phoenix, Arizona, in the greater Phoenix area, focused on serving pregnant women who are experiencing homelessness. We have 5 maternity homes, family-style homes, across the valley. And we welcome women who are pregnant and, as I said, experiencing homelessness, and they can stay until their baby is a year old. We have live-in AmeriCorps members who live in our maternity homes and provide the front line of support for our moms and their babies. Our AmeriCorps members span age ranges. They often are right out of college and looking to do a year of service. But we call our AmeriCorps members our secret sauce. They they enable us to have the model that we have, which is a small ratio, typically about 6 to 7 mothers in a home with 3 to 4 AmeriCorps members. And it's that day-to-day support, specifically that AmeriCorps are able to provide, that enable our mothers to navigate the challenges of pregnancy and childbirth and learning to care for their babies, as well as achieving goals that will help set them up for self-sufficiency when they leave our homes.
Okay, I want to be named part of the secret sauce of of a place that I work. That's pretty cool.
Absolutely.
And I did want to flag, I believe that Maggie's Place is part of what's known as the Healthy Futures portfolio or issue area for AmeriCorps. Mary, do you want to explain what Healthy Futures, what that is, and how Maggie's Place fits into that context?
Yeah, sure. Our legislation basically mandates the agency to focus on 6 specific issue or policy areas. One of them is on healthy outcomes for communities. There are 5 others, but this is one of our main focus areas. And so Maggie's Place is focusing on moving community outcomes in the space of healthier lives for the residents and particularly unhoused moms.
Okay, awesome. Well, Scott, you've been waiting patiently as we've been sort of laying the groundwork here. I wanted to ask, what is the AmeriCorps LEARNS project, and what role is Mathematica playing in supporting the Office of Research and Evaluation at AmeriCorps?
So, as Mary mentioned earlier, AmeriCorps produces a tremendous amount of research and data and evidence every year, and it always continues to grow. And it also creates a lot of evaluation, building resources for organizations to use for their own program. And our role for ORE, the Office of Research and Evaluation, is to help communicate all that information and those resources to various audiences that Mary also mentioned earlier. So we're talking about Congress, we're talking about program partners, we're talking about even internal AmeriCorps staff. So, with the amount of information and research and knowledge that's being developed, we don't want that information just to sit on the shelf and collect dust. So our goal and our role is to help communicate that information out, but also to make sure we're communicating it out in a way that it's being put to use and that it's drawing awareness to the research that's being done on civic engagement and national service, or just how to conduct an evaluation. These are great resources that AmeriCorps produces, and we want them to be in the hands of the folks who can use them, both to improve their evaluation building activities, but most importantly, to make a difference in their communities. So our goal is to help AmeriCorps Office of Research and Evaluation put all that information out there and put it to good use, so that the audiences are aware of the evidence that exists for national service, and also to help build their capacity to conduct evaluation. And we do that in a lot of various different ways, which is really exciting and fun to do. So we create, for example, a whole bunch of products, which can take the form of infographics, fact sheets, newsletters. We create webinars. We host a variety of other things. Really, any way we can figure out how to get that information out there, that's what we want to do to make that knowledge known to everyone who can put it to use. And then another thing that we do is we help ORE manage their evidence exchange, which is an online repository of research studies on the AmeriCorps.gov site. So as new information or new studies are being conducted each year, we help the ORE put that information out there on the evidence exchange, so that the new knowledge is known and it can also be put to use. So that's a few things that we do, and there's no shortage of activities that are needed to help communicate all the good work being done.
Okay, that's very cool. I'm a big fan of those kinds of online clearinghouses of evidence. I know there are a few others that Mathematica has worked on in the past or is currently working on, but it seems like a great resource when somebody has a question and they want to see what the research says. If has any research been done on something, it's nice that there are resources like that available to check online. And I know we'll be talking a little bit later in this conversation about the State of the Evidence report that Mathematica did for AmeriCorps. So I'm looking forward to talking about that too. Mary, I want to turn back to you. So broadly speaking, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how the agency measures its impacts, particularly given that there are these multiple tiers of things that you're trying to accomplish in terms of civic participation, programs, interventions, participants. So maybe to start, has the process of measuring impacts changed over time, and if so, how?
Yeah, I can give you some concrete examples. So some of the ways that we measure impacts for those who serve, members and volunteers who serve in our programs, is, I think I mentioned, we have a member exit survey that we administer to everyone completing their year of service. But we supplement that with more longitudinal survey research where we look over time, at least a year post-service, to see where they are in terms of either their educational pursuits or a particular career, and whether or not they're still engaged in their community in any way. So, for example, we just finished up a 5-year, 6-year study with our National Civilian Community Corps, or NCCC, where we followed members for 2 years to look at their outcomes a little bit post their year of service. We're doing something similar with the Public Health AmeriCorps initiative, where we are following those who serve in a Public Health AmeriCorps program over time, again, to see where they end up in their careers. And we are really looking at how to do that a bit more intentionally with no matter what program someone's serving in, so that we're looking at how their experience was while in a program, immediately concluding their service, and then a year out, ideally, to see where they are. In terms of our interventions and our, community organizations that are partnering with us using members and volunteers to deliver services, we have program evaluation studies, and that usually comes in 2 ways. In some cases, the organization itself is conducting an evaluation of its program and submitting those findings to us at headquarters, if you will. In other cases, we're sponsoring a set of evaluations, and I can give you an example. We're looking right now at what we call a bundled evaluation, and that takes different organizations who are looking at similar types of outcomes using similar types of strategy. We bundle them together, we design an evaluation, and we work closely to design that evaluation together, develop any instruments that may need to be developed, and then working with folks to understand how they can best assess the outcomes that they're trying to change, basically. So we've got that in our healthy outcomes space. We've got that in our volunteer generation fund space. We're doing some of that work in our climate change space. But the point is that, in some cases, we lead and sponsor a sort of national level evaluation where our partner organizations can participate, and it's sort of a multi-site evaluation. In other cases, depending on what program fund you're using, you may be required to conduct your own evaluation. So you're using either an internal evaluator or a third party to evaluate your intervention. You submit that information to us, and we then try to compile it and look at it in a systematic way. I think Scott mentioned that. And then in terms of, what are we doing around the social capital in a community, right? I mean, there's this assumption that by mobilizing members and volunteers, by having organizations, work with the community to move certain outcomes, that you're creating some level of social capital. It's a hard thing to measure directly, but we would say that this biannual survey that we do with the census is one way of looking at trends in these types of behaviors over time, where we sort of assume that we are making contributions to that space, if you will. So different strategies that we use to try and look at all of these different levels of impact. And to your earlier question, I would say in years past, we would do one strategy more than another. I would say at this point in time, it's pretty balanced. Our office has basically 2 big portfolios of work. One tends to focus on our members and volunteers and sort of this type of behavior in the U.S. general population. The other tends to focus on program evaluation research, as well as capacity building efforts. I would add also that we partner with academics across the country where we have a research grant program, and they help us look at more local types of civic engagement, community engagement, and what that social connection, social capital might look like at a more local level versus that national level survey that we do. So multiple strategies, multiple partners, all needed to answer all of the questions that are tied to our mission.
Has the level of expectation around how sophisticated the research or data needs to be changed over time too? Like, was there a time when it was sort of process measures, and now you're trying to show causal impacts? Are there higher levels of expectations around the kind of quality of data that you have to collect and use?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that in the last decade or so, our agency, as well as other federal agencies, has really moved in the direction of assuming that quality performance data is important. You want that output, you want that outcome data. Those are critical ways of assessing sort of real-time progress and making sure you're on track. But there is an increased expectation that you will have some causal evidence. So for example, AmeriCorps invests almost half of its money in educational programs. We want to improve academic outcomes for young people across the country, K through 12 and some post-secondary. At some point, the expectation from Congress, from the public, from the White House has been, okay, well, what are your most effective programs? And by effective, we want you to use the most gold standard, rigorous design available so that you can say, relative to other types of interventions, you're seeing these types of academic outcomes, and you can be pretty confident that it's because the programs you're funding are playing a role in that. So yes, I would say the bar has been set higher over the last decade or so. Our requirements of grantees are tied to levels of funding and the level of rigor that one expects. I think that at this moment in time, we are trying to balance that so it's not an either or, but it's all of it. And what is the best type of data, depending on the question and the, I guess, I don't want to say risk, but the stakes of a decision, right? Like if you're trying to tweak a program because you seem to be on track but might need a little pivoting, that's one stake. If you're talking about the investment of, $500 million in a tutoring program, that's another stake. That's a different level of public dollars being invested. So you want to have more confidence that what you're doing is the right strategy. So yeah, I think that the stakes have gotten higher, the expectations have changed, but I would also say that at least at AmeriCorps, we're trying to balance and right size and position everyone to be able to succeed and have some good data, no matter where it is on that continuum, to do the best decision making they can.
Okay. Diana, I want to turn to you now. We just heard from Mary about the role of AmeriCorps' Office of Research and Evaluation. You have a corresponding role at Maggie's Place. So I'm curious, how do data and evaluation figure into your work at Maggie's Place? Like what kind of data do you collect? What are you evaluating and how are you doing that? And to what extent do you benefit from AmeriCorps' work in making Maggie's Place more data-driven and evidence-based?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Maggie's Place is definitely in the growth phase of data and learning from our data and evaluating the data we do have. So back in 2015, Maggie's Place joined HMIS, which is Maricopa's homeless management system. And so we've really tailored how we track our client data within the system. So we do our intake and we gather all sorts of information from our clients. So demographic information, we track the reasons why they're experiencing homelessness, how long they've been homeless, their job history, and then also history with substance use or domestic violence. So we capture all of that information at the beginning during our intake so that the moms that we serve can tailor their goals that they have with their case manager to really utilize that year and a half that they live with us at Maggie's Place. We are involved at a broader level with an impact evaluation through Notre Dame. So we are studying the effectiveness of maternity homes. So it's a 5-year study that we are participating with 4 other maternity homes, and we're tracking the moms that do participate in our program versus the moms that don't participate in our program. So I'm really excited about this just to see the outcomes with that of, can we provide more of that concrete evidence that we're discussing to larger stakeholders on the effectiveness of maternity homes. Additionally, tying back to that growth period that we're in, we are working with Mathematica very closely on evaluating the systems that we have right now. So how do we clean up all of those tracking spreadsheets to make it the most efficient that we can, so that when we present to stakeholders and grant funders, we're able to capture what we're learning in easy grabs, if you will. And then Stephanie can talk a little bit about our connection to AmeriCorps.
Okay, that'd be great. Yes, Stephanie, if you want to talk a little bit about the role that AmeriCorps plays in supporting Maggie's Place.
Yes, for sure. So we also, within the last year, have participated in a life cycle evaluation through AmeriCorps with several other programs to look at the effectiveness of our peer recovery coaching with our clients. And so there's a lot of overlapping things that we're assessing, things that we're looking at, and that we have been privileged to be invited to be a part of through AmeriCorps. I think the AmeriCorps program itself really lends itself and its grantees and sub-grantees to being evidence-informed and evidence-based. The way that the program is set up to guide programs like ours through learning what it means to be evidence-based, through building in different structures that help support that. We just started our second 3-year grant cycle with AmeriCorps. And as part of that process, programs submit an evaluation proposal. We think AmeriCorps helps us to think from the beginning of a grant cycle about how we're going to evaluate the effectiveness of the program throughout the course of that grant cycle, and provides the tools to do so as well. One of the things about the life cycle evaluation that was very beneficial for us was several of us on staff participated in some capacity building sessions over the course of a year, where we were actually able to not only participate in the evaluation, but learn how to conduct and learn the nuts and bolts of evaluation processes that we could implement on our own. And so subsequently, we did an internal small process study on our own last year to learn what were the ways in which implementation of our initial 3-year AmeriCorps cycle, what went according to plan, how did we pivot, how did we adapt, especially during the COVID pandemic. And that was a great learning process for us.
This is, I think, a question for both you, Stephanie, and Diana, but you've both talked about ways in which you're gathering more data, participating in evaluations. Is there anything scary about that from an organizational standpoint? Like any fear when you enter into that kind of partnership or project that you may get information you didn't want to receive? Or, what if you find out that the outcomes aren't what you were hoping for? And what motivates you to still sort of seek out that information, even if there is some risk involved?
Yeah, I think you kind of touched on it, but definitely the communication to larger leadership is something that I continue to work on because we're gathering facts, we're gathering evidence, and sometimes it is what we want to see and sometimes it's not. And so it's thinking about how do we grow, how do we address challenges that we may be getting feedback from. So definitely communication is something that I'm really focused on, and I think it can be scary.
Mm-hmm. And I would say one of our strengths as an organization is curiosity and having a learner's mindset. We are not afraid to make mistakes as long as we learn from them. We are committed to learning everything that we can through best practices and then trying it. And I think that is one of the key components to successfully incorporating data and evidence into a program like ours. It's very grassroots. In some ways, in terms of our being in touch directly with those we're serving, it's all about how we approach it. It's all about what can we learn. It's better to know than to keep doing something that may be ineffective and not know. So if we can have that mindset, it sets us up to learn and grow together and to do better, which at the end of the day is what our clients and our communities deserve.
Have there been any examples that are top of mind where you have had to pivot or tweak something based on learning that something isn't quite working the way you had hoped it would?
Yes, I think what comes to mind is we have been on a journey of becoming a trauma-informed organization for quite a few years now. So along those lines, we have tried a few different programmatic approaches, and we have tried adjusting some of the guidelines, some of our requirements of the moms that live in our homes and the functioning of our homes. Some of those adjustments were exactly what was needed for the program to work well, and others of those adjustments we learned didn't work for our model, even though they did work well for other organizations who were doing work with similar populations. And so it was through both formal and informal feedback and evaluation that we were able to learn and pivot and continue to build on the strengths of our programming and our model, and scrap something that we tried that was new but didn't work for us.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, a term that I like to say is like fail quickly. So I think that applies to how we approach situations, and that's something that Mathematica has helped us realize too throughout our evaluation with AmeriCorps is do a road test, see what feedback you have, and if you fail, it's okay, but it's better to fail early on in the process.
That's great. I love the idea of road testing, small scale, short term, get information quickly, and then adjust. Scott, I want to turn back to you. We were talking a little bit about the evidence exchange earlier, which is a data source for a report produced by Mathematica on behalf of AmeriCorps last year. Could you talk a little bit about what the state of the evidence report is, and maybe share some of the takeaways there? What did last year's report reveal about AmeriCorps and its impacts?
Certainly. So with the State of the Evidence report, what we did was building off of a prior report that the agency did in 2017 is to look at the large body of literature that has been built and developed since 2017. So we looked at over 115 studies or so, places like Maggie Place that are doing their own evaluations, what ORE is producing, what Office of Research and Evaluation research grantees are doing. So pulling together this large body of research that's been created since 2017 and really try to identify key themes around the places where AmeriCorps is seeking to make an impact, right? So that's AmeriCorps participants. So those are the members, the volunteers that are serving through AmeriCorps. The partnering organizations, those are the grantees, the sponsoring organizations that work with AmeriCorps with the funding they get. What are the impacts on communities, right? So as these services are coming in across the country to address local challenges, what is the impact of these programs and service, national service on those local communities and the challenges they're maybe experiencing? And then another area was to help synthesize some of the information on national service and civic engagement more broadly. So these are the four layers, participants, partners, communities, society. That's where AmeriCorps is seeking to make an impact. And we had a large number of studies that looked at all that. So our goal was to kind of identify some of the key themes in those areas. So for example, with participants, Mary mentioned earlier with some of the survey data, the member exit survey data, trying to get understanding, for example, of what are the cultural competencies that AmeriCorps members possess when they finish their service term, and looking at data there. For partners, how are AmeriCorps members and volunteers helping to build the capacity of those sponsoring organizations or partner organizations to meet their project goals, or to just increase their capacity to to sustain themselves in their communities. In the case of community impacts, we found based on the large body literature that there's a lot of evidence for the impacts on education outcomes and environmental stewardship outcomes, in terms of the national service programs that are operating in those areas, and programs that are focusing on those areas, but also some of the all the other AmeriCorps focus areas. The State of the Evidence report highlighted how they help to generate a return on investment. So when you contribute funding to those programs, not only are they making an impact in their communities, but they're actually demonstrating value after the fact. So the State of the Evidence report highlighted some key findings there. It also highlighted scaling. When you find an effective solution in one place, how do you take that and bring it to other communities and hopefully replicate that success elsewhere? So we touched on some of the studies that AmeriCorps and ORE have produced in that area, and how that all also accumulates into the scalar tool that can help prepare organizations, in their potential scaling aspirations. And then in the final bucket on the society level, the State of Evidence report highlights data from the civic engagement and volunteering supplement as part of the community population survey, just to get a sense of what are the national rates of volunteering, and what are some differences that may exist among demographic groups. But then, and Mary mentioned earlier, the Office of Research Evaluation Research grantees, who are doing new and innovative work on just understanding national service and civic engagement more broadly. So, what are some new cutting edge methods and findings from those teams? And one, for example, really digging into participatory research methods, for example, where you're using research, but you're really engaging and incorporating community members into both the design of the research, but also to address the community challenges that are identified in the community. So, in a nutshell, the State of the Evidence report is trying to do a lot, but that's because AmeriCorps is trying to do a lot and really highlight the key findings in each of those 4 areas that it's trying to make an impact, both to highlight not just lessons learned and where there's a lot of evidence, but also pointing to where more research is needed. And AmeriCorps is the learning organization as it is as well. They're always looking for ideas of where to go next with their learning agenda. So the State of the Evidence report was also had that in mind in terms of as you're thinking about future research efforts, where could more effort be needed or more research needed, or where are some areas that could be strengthened. So that's what we tried to do with the State of the Evidence report. And of course, the evidence base continues to grow. So I'm sure there will be future synthesis efforts down the road as well.
Let me pick up on 2. You talked about participants and cultural competencies, and so if I'm graduating from college and I'm assessing whether I want to apply for an AmeriCorps position, does the evidence suggest that I'll be set in some way, that what are the benefits to my potential career aspirations? Like, is there anything it suggests in terms of earning potential or ability to secure certain kinds of jobs down the line if I become an AmeriCorps member? What does the evidence suggest in terms of the benefits of being an AmeriCorps member?
Yeah, so we definitely we reviewed a few studies, outcome studies that did show that there are changes in education and employment outcomes, from a pre-test post-test standpoint. So there is evidence to suggest that there are benefits, but one area we highlight is needing more impact studies just to further strengthen that argument that by joining AmeriCorps and serving through AmeriCorps, that your service will have these impacts on those outcomes. But there are studies in that area, and it's an area that probably needs more evidence. But there's a lot to suggest that there are positive benefits.
And then in terms of civic engagement, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with what the data show. Has civic engagement gone up, or is there data that shows that AmeriCorps in specific parts of the country or specific moments has increased civic engagement? What does the data show in terms of that specific indicator?
Yeah, so I'll say for the State of the Evidence report, we reviewed the analysis that was on the CEV, the Civic Engagement and Volunteering data set through 2019, and there's going to be a new data set coming out, and that I know ORE is working on this year. We're excited to highlight those findings for 2023. So the rates they remain stable, I would say over time, but there were some differences in terms of the demographic or socioeconomic and family characteristics. So I think if I recall correctly, like around 30% of Americans, for example, reported that they volunteered and for an organization or for an association. Again, we're excited to see the 2023 numbers on that area, but there are differences. So in terms of, for example, women volunteer at a higher rate than men. Race ethnicity is related to the extent to which the frequency or the rates of volunteering, generation. So things like all these different factors help to understand not just how much volunteering and civic engagement is happening, but with whom it's happening, and all those things just help paint an important and vibrant picture of what is civic life in America, which is an important cornerstone of society. So it's a wealth of information, and and new information and new data is coming out soon.
Okay, great. And we'll link in our show notes to the State of the Evidence report so people can dig in, because as you said, it's a big report and it's trying to cover a lot of information. Mary, I did want to turn back to you. I'm curious how the State of the Evidence report influenced the agency's thinking about data and evidence.
As Scott mentioned, it was one of the more comprehensive reviews we were able to do on the body of evidence that the agency and our partners have generated over the last 5 years. So it was incredibly useful to see it all in one place, to see where in our spheres of influence we seem to have more evidence versus less evidence. And I can say that, we had a hunch where we had less evidence, and that was particularly around our partnerships with organizations. Scott mentioned, we try to systematically look at what additional capacity our programs and resources might offer to an organization, but we're also very interested in what kind of partner we are to our partner organizations. And we just haven't had a systematic way to assess that. And so as a result of seeing and having this sort of our hunch in this gap validated, we really are in the middle of piloting a partner survey where we can capture that information and that feedback on a more regular cadence and in a more sort of centralized and systematic way, not dissimilar to our member exit survey. We really recognize that gap in our own data collection. So it was very useful in pointing us in a direction that we had been talking about as an agency for a number of years, but this very much helped us validate that, yes, indeed, we do need to develop some stronger data in that area. And it's, generated a lot of conversations. I would say that the State of the Evidence framework also helped us figure out where we might be able to sort of step back a little from the evidence building and where we might need to fine tune it. And I'll go back to the conversation you were having around sort of our participant outcomes. We have a lot of evidence and data in this space, and it's not by accident since it's been a primary focus of the agency. But what we are realizing is we don't sort of have the drill down, the more nuanced information. So, for example, what types of leadership skills do people who participate in our programs develop? What kind of civic leaders do they become? Where do they go to work? Prior work suggests that they go to work in the nonprofit space. They often go to work for the organization that they've served in. For our seniors program, we are piloting, workforce development programs, for second, third careers. There's just a lot of detail about those outcomes that we don't know. While we have a sense that they're positive and that things are going according to plan, we would like to know a little bit more specifics around the types of careers, the types of training it requires, and sort of that kind of data, which doesn't show up, I think, a lot in the State of the Evidence. So just 2 examples of where it was informative. It was nice to have it all sort of laid out in one place, but it also pointed to us where our future efforts need to go.
That's fascinating. It brings to mind, I have a lot of friends who did Teach for America out of college, and it's been interesting to track where they've gone after doing Teach for America. Some of them continued on as teachers. Some of them were teachers for a while and then moved into other education roles. When I was at a magazine, our education reporter had at one point been a TFA alum. Another person ended up being in politics, and his issue area portfolio is education. So it's interesting to see how that early experience in a similar kind of AmeriCorps type role has influenced people's careers, but not necessarily going to work for the organization that they originally were volunteering at. One of the kinds of studies that Mathematica looked at, Scott, was return on investment studies. And I think that might be something people would be surprised about. It might not be the first thing top of mind that people think about in terms of evaluating the impacts of AmeriCorps, given its mission around civic engagement. But yeah, talk a little bit about that specific kind of study, return on investment. What are they? Why do it? Maybe what we've learned from the ROI studies.
Yeah. So ROI studies, what they do is they help quantify a program's benefits relative to the costs, right? And doing that kind of a benefit to cost analysis, that can help you get a better sense of what kind of financial value that a program can generate. So, we know, funding and financial resources, they're finite, right? So they can really be an important tool to help you to determine, if I have this amount of money or this amount of funding, where should I put that towards? What's going to give me the most bang for my buck, for example. So what an ROI, return on investment study, will do is is quantify the costs that are associated with implementing that program, and then look at what are some of the financial benefits that get produced because of that, and do a relative comparison of those. So when we looked at the evidence, related to those ROI studies, and AmeriCorps, I think today has produced about 16 of those studies, and I know more are on its way. They found across those different focus areas that of interest to the agency that with programs that are funded in those areas, they generate a positive return on investment. So so for every dollar in, that much more gets returned in value when you look at the costs and the overall benefits. And again, it's really another tool in the toolbox to help you make data informed decisions about where to put funding. A program can make an impact, but some folks would say, is it worth it? Or should I take that funding and put it elsewhere? So those ROI studies help provide a little more information, help you make that determination from a funding standpoint.
Mary, I know we talked earlier about audiences. I asked a question about who the audiences are for the evidence that you put out. Why is a return on investment study, or even evidence of impact more generally, important for communicating the work of AmeriCorps?
Well, I think the return on investment analyses are particularly important and salient for appropriators. So, the monetization of the costs and benefits of a program creates very tangible metrics for people. You're going to give us this much money, and as a result, you can expect this much back in terms of your social benefits, in terms of costs that you may not have, you no longer have to pay because of this particular program. So it really is a metric and a way of looking at the evidence of a program that resonates with the folks who are, making decisions about how much funding to invest in these types of services. So for us, it's just speaking the language of certain stakeholder groups. But I think where it's perhaps different than maybe some of these types of analyses that were done 10, 15 years ago, because we have such a strong foundation of evidence for programs and for participants, I think the ability to create these kind of estimates are more robust. I think the estimates are more credible because they're starting from a place of knowing that these programs are generating the outcomes that they think they're generating. In many cases, that's using a comparative design. And I think that just makes for a much more compelling cost-benefit ratio. And that is ultimately, I think, what some stakeholder groups are most interested in.
Seth, I want to turn back to you. In terms of demonstrating impact, showing the value of the work that an AmeriCorps program is doing, or a grantee program is doing, can you share any stories or examples of how evidence has improved a program or improved an outcome for the residents that you serve at Maggie's Place?
Yes. So one of our primary objectives over the last few years has been to increase the length of stay for mothers in our homes, recognizing that the longer a mother stays in one of our homes, the stronger her tools are when she moves out. And so we have actually seen an increase over the last few years in that length of stay, going from an average of about 4 months to about 7 months, which may seem small and incremental, but in our work, a woman might stay with us for a night or a week or a year. And so that little bit of incremental change has been huge for us. We've really sought to use the lens of evidence to update many of our practices as well, in order to increase that length of stay. And so we have used evidence to adjust our programmatic guidelines, to adopt trauma-informed care practices, to adopt an evidence-based curriculum that our AmeriCorps members administer called Seeking Safety. And it is a resilience-building curriculum that has multiple uses and I think has been very instrumental in helping increase length of stay and overall sense of satisfaction with the program. And so simultaneously, we have shifted our outcome focus within the last year, even for our AmeriCorps program, from being more generic to more specific, measuring housing, employment, sobriety specifically. And I think similarly to what I mentioned earlier, we've begun thinking about evidence not as a one and done, not as we've adopted a practice and checked that off the list, but as a continual process. And we are seeking to build our organizational capacity accordingly in order to sustain that direction.
All right, so I want to wrap up today's conversation with a future-oriented question for the group. I'd love for everyone to weigh in. So what's on your to-do list or goal sheet for the next couple of years in terms of generating and using data to further the work of AmeriCorps and Maggie's place? And I guess in the case of Mathematica, maybe Mathematica's role in furthering the work of AmeriCorps and or Maggie's place. And Diana, Stephanie, I don't know which or both of you want to start, but I was hoping you could start talking a little bit about Maggie's place.
Yeah, I can speak to kind of the client focus. So definitely building and organizing our infrastructure, specifically with technology. I think we've just grown exponentially as an organization within the past few years with our bed capacity, and we added more shelters. And so my goal is to make sure that 10, 15 years down the line, the organization had this structure set up on the front end so that when we look back, we can say this is organized, this has been well kept, we know where to find this information, so that it's more of like a forward-thinking approach. So yeah, definitely the technology. And additionally, I think also visualizing the data we have. So I share an office with one other colleague, and we're data nerds, and we have all of our spreadsheets. And I think communicating that to our grant funders and leadership can feel very intimidating. So we are focused on, we have a year-end number count, and so how do we present these 10-page documents of information in like infographics in a way that makes sense to the general public.
And I would say with that, really utilizing the data that we have in decision making and doing that on a continual basis, on a daily basis, a weekly basis, is something that is at the forefront of my mind as I think through the programming of our maternity homes and making sure that if we're going to keep something the same, it's based in data. And if we're going to change something, it's also based in data.
Well, Diana, I just want to say we love spreadsheets and data nerds here. So we hope that that you keep on keeping on. I am going to turn to you now, Scott. Any aspirations? What's on your to-do list or goal sheet or vision board for the coming years in terms of using data and evidence to further the missions of Maggie's Place and AmeriCorps?
Yeah, so our goals for the upcoming year is to continue collaborating with the Office of Research and Evaluation and really just try to shine a light on the great research and evidence that AmeriCorps helps to produce. And we really want to continue to put that information out there in the hands of those who need it and can also put into good use. So one example, and I mentioned earlier, the 2023 CEV data. That was released not too long ago, and so one thing we're going to be working on in the upcoming year is providing fact sheets and other resources to really provide an updated picture of what civic engagement looks like in America, and really just help provide a pulse of what civic life is looking like in society today. So that's one set of products we're really looking forward to working on this year. And then another line of work we're going to be doing with the Office of Research and Evaluation is to create a whole suite of capacity building supports for AmeriCorps staff. They're the ones working with grantees and partners, and those grantees and partners are the ones building evidence. So we're going to be creating a host of tools and resources to build staff capacity to support those grantees in building evidence and infusing data into their program, because that helps then ultimately produce more high quality evaluations in the back end. But yeah, so those are just two examples, but our overall goal is to really support ORE and communicating, disseminating all the great work that's coming out of the agency, to really shine a light on what's the evidence for national service, but to continue to prioritize their goals of putting information out there to good use and building capacity and really just improving civic life in America in general. So those are a few things that we're looking forward to working on this year.
Okay, excellent. Mary, I'd love for you to have the last word here. What's on your to-do list? What is on your agenda in terms of using data and evidence to further AmeriCorps' mission?
Well, I would certainly echo what everyone has said, but ultimately our goal is to continue using our impact framework to develop the most relevant and robust evidence that we can so that communities can use it to offer the most effective public services available. I would also hope that we would use this evidence inside of our own organization to foster a culture of learning, to use this information to help us make better policy decisions, make better programmatic decisions, identify best practices based on the evidence that we're generating in partnership with our partner organizations. And I think that, I aspire to build evidence for those who are curious. To borrow Stephanie's language, I love her framework. I think that ultimately this evidence is in service to creating better lives for people. And that's what my goal is to continue to do that with the hope that it is useful to those who most need it and most want to improve the conditions in their communities.
Okay, I think that's a great note to end on. Stephanie, Diana, Scott, Mary, thank you so much for speaking with me today. And if I haven't said it yet, I'm sure it'll be in the intro, but happy 30th birthday to AmeriCorps too. It's quite a milestone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks again to our guests, Dr. Mary Hyde, Stephanie Garippa, Diana Gioia, and Scott Richman. And thank you for listening to On the Evidence, the Mathematica podcast. This episode was produced by my Mathematica colleague, Rich Clement, and made possible with financial support from AmeriCorps. If you liked this episode, please consider leaving us a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. To catch future episodes of the show, subscribe at mathematica.org/ontheevidence.